what material, what part of these verses jumps out at you and says, wow, that's interesting, or wow, I didn't realize that. What touches you? Yeah, Sarah. The length of time that it took for the waters to recede. I'm starting to feel that way here. I go walking and it's squish, 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 squish. It took some time, long time. What else do we have going on? I don't know, but we definitely have a specific date and a rather vague location in the mountains of Arafat. I wish I could tell you what significance that has, but I cannot. Jim.
Yeah, I think the first verse says, God remembers Noah as well as the wildlife and all the livestock with him in the ark. Did he forget him?
Wonderful question. When you remember something, what do you do? Huh? Okay, Jim was being funny, and Carolyn had said something, but it kind of blended together.
Go, oh.
You go, oh, okay. Could be. How? This is an important piece, actually. Did God forget Noah and the animals before this moment? Or does that remember mean maybe something a little different than we think of remembering? Because, there are times that I remember my anniversary just before the date, which is a really good thing, but I don't think God had forgot. Yeah, Devon. Okay. Did I see another hand over here, Jim?
Yeah, it was past tense. It says remember. God remembered Noah. In other words, I don't think he ever forgot it. But when I'm sitting there looking at it, remember, that's past tense. In other words, he's got him in his foresight all the time. He's the one that created this situation.
This term, remembered, is used 70 times in the Old Testament. But instead of it being something like forget and remember, it's to focus on. God is now focused on Noah and the animals. Why would Moses put it this way? Why do you think Moses would put it this way? What has just happened? He has destroyed the earth. Mission accomplished. He said he was going to do it. He has done it. And now God has shifted his focus not from what he said he was going to do, but to that family and those critters that he has saved. It's also interesting, of the 70 times that term remembered is used, roughly 45 have God extending mercy to an individual, either in the terms of salvation or barrenness in the Old Testament. you might remember. And then God remembered Rachel. And God remembered Sarah. And later on, and God remembered Elizabeth. New Testament, a little different, but we have that concept that God is now focusing his attention on these individuals and people. What else do we see happening here? Come on.
At the end of verse 1 there, it says, "And God made a wind to pass over the earth." Is that the first appearance of what we know now, the jet stream and all of these things that move weather around? And I don't know that there's ever mention of winds or anything like that prior to this.
Well, that's a wonderful question. The Hebrew word there is, and I always pronounce it wrong, but it's roughly ruach, which could be translated wind, breath, or spirit. And I am convinced that there should be that memory from us of Genesis 1, chapter 2. Remember, with the waters and chaos, and the Spirit of God hovered over the deep? We see again where God's Spirit is being poured out onto this stuff he has just destroyed. Almost like all of humanity now gets a second chance, a legitimate second chance.
The earth was supposed to be covered with water, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says here in this verse 1 that at the end the water began to subside. Where did it subside to?
Where did it subside to? I think it's important that we also attach verse 2 to that, because you notice it says that the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were closed. So we no longer have the water coming from every which way, but God shuts them up. And in that shutting up, and in that, however you want to see it, wind, breath, spirit, perhaps evaporation starts to happen, and perhaps these waters start attempting to go back into their originally commanded state and places. Of course, they aren't getting back real quickly, because as we continue to read, even though they have subsided, you still can't see the mountaintops. So imagine how deep it must have been. What other good things do we have here? Anything else in those first 5 verses? All right, well then let's attempt to hit the next 7. Volunteer to read verses 6 to verse 12. Thank you.
After 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made, and he sent out a raven. It went back and forth until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see whether the water of the earth's surface had gone down. But the dove found no resting place for her foot. She returned to him in the ark because the water covered the surface of the whole earth. He reached out and brought her back into the ark to himself. So Noah waited 7 more days and sent out the dove from the ark again. Then the dove came to him that evening, and there was a crushed olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the water of the earth's surface had gone down.
Through 12.
After he had waited another 7 days, he sent out the dove, but she did not return to him again.
What seems special here?
Noah's trying to find land.
He's throwing them out, trying to see if it's suitable to return to life the way it used to be. As a Steeler fan, I so want to insert a joke that the first thing he booted off the ark was a raven. So want to do that. I think I just did, didn't I? Thank you. I like that laugh. That's good. Yeah, really. What happens to the dove initially? Returns. And he waits how long? A week. And what happens the next time it goes out? It comes back with a twig, and he waits how long again? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Has anyone ever had family visiting with them? After 3 okay, that's not my saying this, but someone said after 3 days they start to stink. Imagine the ark resting and it stopped. Okay, so now it's possible to go away. And Mrs. Noah still has this place filled with all of these animals. Not to mention 3 sons and 3 daughter-in-laws. And her husband doesn't seem all that concerned about getting out. Keeps sending the dove out and it comes back and no one's leaving. Do you think maybe they were feeling a little stress, a little pressure? Starting to go a little stir crazy. I mean, my boys, 2 days of rain, cooped up in the house, and they're ready to, we're ready to send them anywhere. Can you imagine the patience that this must have taken? The faith and trust that Noah and Mrs. Noah has had in God? Because, let's face it, if the dove's bringing back an olive branch, we have. Not going to be much worse than what you saw in South Carolina. Baby water up to here. It's doable. Giraffes are big. They'll make it. Anything else here interesting to you? That 7 is the number of perfection? That sounds as good of a reason as any to wait that amount of time. Initially, the ark rests for 40 days, and all Noah does is open a window, which is pretty interesting. Instead of opening the door, he still seems quite content to rest in the place that God has provided for him and his family. In that shelter, in that safety, in that security. How about 13 to 19? Volunteer. Come on. To 19. What jumps off the page at you?
How specific they are about the days and times. I just think it gives credibility to the story. You know, when I tell a lie, I try to make it as vague as possible so nobody can catch me in whatever, you know what I mean? And they're so very specific about which day this happened and how many days and, you know, and I think it gives great credibility to the story. Not that any of us doubt it,
But isn't it neat how Scripture constantly does that? In the year Uzziah died, and a decree went out from Caesar that all the world should be taxed. On the 601st year and on the, I should actually get it right, correct? First day of the month, in the first month, this happened. Compare that with Cinderella. When did the story of Cinderella happen? Once upon a time. And how did they live? Happily ever after. When? Happily ever after. There's no... You cannot vet that. Vetting's very big now, I hear. You cannot vet that. How can you go back and check when once upon a time was? Or in a galaxy far, far away. Here we have concrete dates. You can check that out. Isn't our God good? I think it's right there. What else do we have going on here?
They waited until God said go out.
Wow. What, we're going to say this because I don't know that everyone heard that. When did they leave the ark? When God said so. How much trouble do you think we modern people could escape if we just acted when God said so? How much better do you think our world could be if we just did stuff when God said so? Or maybe even the inverse of that. If we stopped doing things when God said, stop it! Either one would work really well. They both work fantastic, but either one would put us in such better shape. Did you notice that the ground was dry before God said, okay, you can go now? But they didn't leave. Man. And we wonder about that whole introduction of Noah, that Noah was unlike anyone else. I'd have been itching to get off that ark. But instead, he took it easy and he waited on God's timing. How do we do with that? Do we like to force God's timing? I don't know. You know, there have been times I hear about employment opportunities. I've heard, who am I kidding? Employment wasn't nearly as big. When I was in seminary, do you know what the biggest, most worried concern with regard to God's timing was? All of my friends wanted married. And there were some of us, we'd do anything to start dating whoever we thought might work well. I mean, after all, we're at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. The girls there, you know, they're good, solid young ladies, godly women. Any of them will do, right? Doesn't matter which one. She's thinking about where I'll be sleeping for the next 40 days, and then after 7 days, maybe. Well, no, I was one of the good ones, and I waited for that one that God would lead into my life and change. Whew. Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Jim Sally. But sometimes we seem to think that maybe we know better than God. And if I just open this door and force my way through, well, God loves me. He'll take care of it all. When we don't really give him any thought beforehand, and we definitely don't wait for his go out. Now, there are a couple times that we don't have to wait to hear God say to do something. If you want to share your testimony with someone, it's carte blanche. You don't have to wait to hear God say, share your testimony. You can do that free. We know that's okay. We also know it's okay to pray. But sometimes we make these life decisions just by flipping a coin. Or something seems better than the other. Usually when we do that, we get ourselves in a whole heap of trouble. But Noah waited for God to say so. And then what do they do? God says you can leave the ark, and what do they do? Thank you. That wasn't a trick question, folks. They left.
What's so interesting to me is in order they left. The families, like the lizards, got together. In other words, God had to do that. He had to bring them together. Just like he brought them in.
It probably shouldn't surprise us because our God is a God of order and organization. He's not a God of chaos. If everything is chaotic in our life, we probably should stop and think and look at our life, because God is not one of disorder. Yeah, Wayne. I don't like when you ask questions, Wayne. You always ask these questions that I have to talk a lot and say nothing. That's a great question. I wish I could give you a great answer. I look at my pastoral colleagues. Can you shed any light on that? Where does the date of 600 in the 601st year in verse 13? Any idea where the 601st year comes from? Pastor Raper? Pastor Russell? Hey. Well, I'm just going to sit back down. Devon, would you like to? Devon, Jamie? Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? Maybe, you see that? Isn't it great when we all learn at Bible study? There's Abraham's age. Did you ever think maybe you should just say end of Noah's age? 601, I'll take that. I like that. It's not the age of the earth, it's Noah. Good answer, guys. I like that. Whew. Volunteer for 20 through 22. Carolyn.
23.
20 to 22.
And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet Savior, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth.
What is the first thing that Noah does when he leaves the ark?
Build.
I heard two little mentions, not sure that I really heard them. Build an altar. Why does one build an altar? To honor God. He praises God. His first action after coming out of the ark is to praise and worship the Lord. And in what fashion does he do it? He prepares sacrifices. No more questions from you. One's enough. No. Go ahead, Blaine.
What happens to the animals that he sacrificed and they get clean?
Well, remember how many clean
7.
animals he took?
7.
He took 7 pair of clean animals. So there's probably still enough to go forward. And said, technically the Hebrew doesn't call them unclean. Technically the Hebrew says the not clean animals, he took as 2s. So we do have, if you can call 14 animals an abundance, we have an abundance of the clean ones. Perhaps because God knew that after all this, he was going to ask for worship. Now, how did Noah know how to prepare? I was really worried. You were going to ask, how did Noah know to have burnt offerings to please God? Because we don't get all that information until Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I was going to have to hem and haw and say, I don't know, God probably told him at some point while he was in the ark. We just didn't need to know it yet, because Moses would get to that. Very well could be. My guess would be it would be in footnotes. And see, isn't it neat how God works out all the details? That we don't have to worry about a species going extinct because they were only brought in 2 by 2, and God's going to demand or ask for a burnt offering, which would eliminate if they were only 2. Man, see, he's trustworthy. Locks you up in a big boat to get through the flood, and he gives everything necessary.
Given the amount of time that they're on the ark too, we could assume that there was one of those long dark nights. There could have been some reproductive activities amongst the animals. The gestation period of a lot of animals. There could have been a lot of newborn things in that time, but they weren't all asleep.
You know, I have to say, I don't know that I ever quite thought about that. But I will probably never look at the story of Noah and the ark the same way. Thank you, Devon.
I think verse 15 really answers the question. Then God spoke to Noah. I mean, Noah's going to give him instructions on what to do. He's not going to say just leave and let him lie. He's going to give them instructions. Just because we don't have that information doesn't mean that Noah wasn't instructed to do what he did.
And we're just given what we need. Maybe not the entirety of. Because I would hope that during that time that Noah would be talking to God more than we see. And I would hope that, God was answering Noah. What else do we have here?
What I'm reading, the way I'm interpreting verse 22,
Kind of like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps going and going and going. God has a really great way of taking care of us. So in case there was anyone in here really panicking about global warming or global cooling or whatever else might come down the pike, God is still in control. And as the earth remains, never will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done.
You know, the government is spending so much money on the global warming or the global climate. How do a person think they're gonna have so much control over this? I mean, have they ever thought about how the world was made? You know, and we as a person is gonna change with the weather. You know, there we go.
There are times I'm a pretty simple guy. And I figure if we get, 28 degrees and an inch of rain that turns to an inch of ice, it's God's way of saying stay home. And I'm happy with that. And if God so chooses to make January 85 degrees and sunny, I've lived through that before too. And you know what? I was all right. So, if we want to make it warm, okay. I think I like warm better than cold. I'm not sure. I think it depends on what season it is. The one thing I can agree on is I don't like -20. That's just bad. What else? Anything else here? Then let's see if we can't get just a few more verses in. How about chapter 9 through verse 7, a volunteer? Julia.
And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, and upon everything that creepeth on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every living thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it and from a man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you be fruitful and multiply, teem on the earth and multiply.
All right. What do we have going on here? If this were to, let's put it this way. If this were just a Christian debate and these 7 verses were just given, what would the talking points be? What are the highlights of these 7 verses? God blessed Noah. Okay, there's one. Thou shalt not kill. I'm going to change that just slightly. Life is sacred. Man, can you imagine just in the last, 3 years, if we just took that statement, life is sacred, how many different organizations we could do away with? We wouldn't have to be worried about this life or that life or these other folks or those other folks. It's all special. It's all holy. Treat it that way. What else? What other highlights do we have here? Be fruitful and multiply.
Establish a hand in charge of all the animals. Or at least he has that power.
There's that separation with the animals. I mean, it seems like before there was, the lion laying down with the lamb and those kind of things, but here he's saying, and the fear of you and the dread of you will be in the dread of beasts. So all of a sudden the animals are afraid of man.
That sounds vaguely familiar. And I will place enmity between your offspring and the serpents. Almost sounds like a reoccurring thing. What else do we have here? And God made steak. I like that verse. I like that a lot. So much that if a doctor were ever to tell me to watch my diet, I might quote for him. Verse 3, 9:3. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. If God says it's good, who am I to argue? Okay, those of you that are on a diet restrictions, take that with a grain of salt. Okay, well, don't take the salt, but you know what I'm saying. But it is good. Okay, so we got Noah's blessed. We got life is sacred. We got all kinds of new food. We have... There was something else we had. What else? Fruitful and multiply. We seem to have a human stewardship of the world. There's a whole lot packed into those 7 verses. But I am going to ask, in closing, going to ask one important question that we didn't cover while we were talking about the sanctity of human life. Why is life sacred? Why is it holy?
God created it.
He made us in his image.
We are the image of God. We were meant to be these little bearers of God's image. How could we begin to snuff that out? Each one of us. See, this is where I struggle with folks who may have insecurity issues. Don't. It's all about God. You were made in God's image. And God is holy and good and perfect. So if you are made in His image, what does that make you? A carrier of what is good and holy and perfect. We don't need self-confidence. We need God confidence. Because when we try to build up our own self-confidence, we're acting on the exact opposite side of what makes us so special. And of course, if we're operating out of that dark side, of course we're going to feel miserable. Oh, but I don't have muscles like Mr. Universe. I must be horrible. I would debate this, but I might not be as pretty as Brad Pitt. I think I am, but that's... It's not a big deal. Why? Because I reflect God's image. Because you reflect God's image. That's where our worth stands. And that's why your life is so precious to God. That He would pay whatever price. Even the life of His very own Son. It is 7:28. I am going to give you 2 minutes off tonight. Aren't I generous? That's to make up for the few minutes we ran over the week before and the week before. I thank you for being here and look forward to seeing you Sunday. Have a safe trip home and a wonderful rest of your week.